We are recording, so if you have questions that you don't want to talk on here, you don't have to share your name, um, and make sure you get them to me prior to. Some people did give me some questions to talk about. Hopefully, I'll get to them today too. So, first of all, open it up to questions. We're going to be talking about detoxification today. Oh no, we're not. We're going to be talking about the biopterin pathway today. So, any questions before we get started?
I have one, Dr. Connor.
Uh-huh.
I'm having trouble staying asleep because the wires of the tube are getting all wrapped up.
And wrapped up around you?
Oh, and my pillow and my husband. And so we've tried several things. We've tried putting them under the covers, under the sheets. But so my question is this. Does the bulb, the hammer bulb, actually need to be touching my body? I guess I'm not quite certain how the radio frequencies work. I mean, can I turn my back to it?
Yeah, no, the bulb does not need to be touching your body. It could go through a sheet, so you could put the bulb underneath your fitted sheet if that helps. And it will go through the fitted sheet just fine. Just to kind of give you a layout on how we do it. Maybe you're doing it this way and you're still getting a little tangled. Our Rife machine itself is underneath our bed. And then the USB cord obviously goes up to the laptop, which the laptop is sitting at my bedstand on the top of the bedstand. And then the wires coming out of the front of the Rife machine going to the bulb are underneath the bed, so we will never catch our foot on them or anything like that. And then they just run up behind our bed and between our headboard and our mattress, and the bulb lies between us in the bed. And then right now it's just lying between us. When my wife was dealing with in the throes of melanoma, she kind of snuggled the bulb up next to her. If either one of us are dealing with anything like a cold or a flu oncoming or something, and we're running a program like that, then we'll snuggle the bulb next to me or her. The interesting question, I had somebody else today ask if they taped the wires together, and then they called Mike at True Rife, and Mike said, you don't want to tape the wires together because it can decrease the intensity of the output. So you want the wires, you don't have to like purposely keep them apart, but you don't want to tape them or bind them together.
Okay.
Which that's the first time I've heard that before, but nobody's ever brought that up. So if that helps, I mean, we never get tangled in the cord. So if that layout, the way I described it, helps, and you're not doing it that way, that might solve your problem right there.
Okay.
Good. Any other questions?
It's Jan Smith calling. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Excellent. I have 4 grandchildren here, so I'm going to make this really, really fast. Quiet, please. The black seed human oil,
yes.
2 teaspoons a day. Do I take that first thing in the morning with my vitamin D and my MSM?
You could. I would split them into 2 doses, though.
Good. That's what I've been doing. So, but do I take it first thing even before my
for your shake? You can. There's not any research on that at all.
Okay.
So I would think might be good. I know I've had other people just throw it in your shake, but it is an oil and it could stick to the sides and you could lose some of it.
Okay.
So for conservation purposes, it might be better to just gulp a teaspoon right when you wake up and gulp a teaspoon right when you go to bed. That might be bad. That might be better. It doesn't taste bad or anything. You could chug it and drink it and chase it down with something.
Tastes like tree bark.
But I like tree bark. So
No complaints.
I eat tree bark every day. So everything's relative, right? So you
Absolutely.
keep choking it down.
No, it's not a problem. I just didn't, I just thought should be spread out, but I just thought I would confirm that.
Yeah, I think that would be best. Any other questions?
Oh, one more quick question. Could I put a drop of the oil and a drop of DMSO and spread it on the tumor to absorb through the skin?
Yeah, you could. That'd be a good try. Yeah, that'd be something fun to try.
Oh, awesome. Okay.
Yeah. So that brings up another question. Can you experiment with some things like this? What she said. If a person has breast cancer that's close to the skin, could they experiment with making their own salves like that? My answer is absolutely. You know, all I'm doing is taking research and trying to extrapolate that for you guys. And I've taken my experience of doing that same thing and experimenting and extrapolating that for you guys. And I learn just as much from you when you do things like that as you do from me. So there isn't data on all of this information. So if you feel like the Holy Spirit's leading you to do something, run it by me for sure if you want to, but don't feel bad about trying to experiment with something like that. You might want to run things by me so that you don't put something on you on an open wound that stings like crazy and you wish you never did it. But um, certainly you could experiment with things like that. Any other questions?
Well, Dr. Connor, where do you get DMSO at?
So DMSO is easily purchased on Amazon. It is a liquid though. So
Okay.
it's like water. So DMSO used to be really big in the 70s and 80s for pain and arthritis. You could make it at home. You used to be able to make it with some stuff that you have under your kitchen sink. I don't remember everything that was in it. It's dimethyl sulfoxide, I think, is the technical name for it. And it was touted as this great, fantastic thing, right? I don't use DMSO for really so much of the benefits of DMSO. I use DMSO because it is so readily absorbed. I use it as a carrier. So I have DMSO cream that's an aloe base cream, a little bit of rose oil in it and DMSO in it that I use, that I put curcumin and sometimes bloodroot in it to use as a salve for different things, especially for basal cell and squamous cell cancers. You can also use it for, skin eruptions and things like that. But you could, if you use DMSO that you purchase on Amazon, it's a liquid, so you could mix other things in it, but it would have to be a liquid, or you could mix it with like a shea butter cream to make a paste, and just maybe use a teaspoon of DMSO with a tablespoon or so of shea butter cream and mixing it together really good. So now you got a shea butter DMSO. So there's different things you can do with that to start to make your own different salve applications. Then you might use whatever else you want to use to try to use DMSO as the driver to drive into the tissue, like curcumin or some other anti-inflammatory or cancer killer.
Okay.
Any other questions? Okay, so let's jump into this topic, the biopterin pathway. So the biopterin pathway isn't specifically a cancer pathway by any stretch of the imagination, but it does affect our life big time because this is how you make neurotransmitters. So this is the biopterin pathway right here. And your neurotransmitters are serotonin right here. You can see my screen, right?
Yes.
Okay, dopamine, epinephrine, and norepinephrine. So these are four major neurotransmitters. The one that's not on here because it's not made through the biopterin pathway is glutamate, which we spoke a lot of, I think, last week, which is so essential when it comes to cancer, and we'll touch on that when we talk about these genes. Now, this pathway is run just like everything else. Genes make enzymes to make these different things and to push these different pathways. So phenylalanine, tyrosine, and tryptophan and arginine are amino acids that you get in your diet when you eat protein. And they go through these different genes to make L-DOPA, to make dopamine, tyrosine, here's tyrosine again, makes L-DOPA, to create tryptophan, to make 5-HTP, to make serotonin, and then that's broken down. And then tryptophan goes this way through the chiarine pathway too. So not to get too technical, but serotonin is important to have balance of these neurotransmitters. So it's this can be a little oversimplified, like, oh, serotonin is good. That's your feel-good neurotransmitter. That's what keeps you happy. That's your happy neurotransmitter. Not really, not really at all. If it's in balance, it is, yes. Too little serotonin. So if I have defects on this gene right here, this MAO gene, then too little serotonin is going to cause all sorts of problems in my life. So this MAO gene, and there's more than just one, but this is an old slide, um, holds serotonin in the brain. Defects on it can cause excess serotonin or too little serotonin. So symptoms of too little serotonin are going to be melancholy issues, just real sadness. And well, of course, we can be sad due to circumstances, but if we kind of feel like we're in a pit or in a rut and we can't get out of that rut, we do want to look at neurotransmitters. So here would be a perfect case in point. I don't know what's wrong with me. I'm in this rut. I've kind of always had slight depression my whole life. And lately I have a lot more depression. I don't know what's the matter with me. Well, let's look at your genes. You have a bunch of MAO gene defects. So it's quite possible that serotonin is just shooting down this pathway and you're urinating it right out. So you're not holding serotonin in the brain, and therefore you have a lot of depression. So let's go back upstream on what feeds serotonin, how you could help that person. Well, you could use a dietary component where we could add protein to their diet, and that would help feed serotonin this way. But if they were a cancer patient, we don't want the glutamates that are in the protein, because these are amino acids that will be in proteins, but also glutamates and other amino acids are in protein that we might not want for a cancer patient. We could use 5-HTP to feed that pathway. So you just go back upstream. How can we help feed that pathway to help that person with depression? And we could go right here and use a supplementation program with adding this. Now the problem is you got to be careful because, oh, I do have kind of some sadness, so I'm going to get on some 5-HTP. Well, if you do that and you push this pathway too hard, you can have excess serotonin. So too little will cause depression, but too much causes aggression, short fused, short tempered, get angry quickly, and nobody likes that in their spouse. So defects on this gene can cause it to go too fast or cause it to go too slow in its breakdown process. So it can leave the patient at different times with too little serotonin and sadness, and at other times with too much serotonin, and they're going to bite somebody's head off. So you have to be careful pushing the pathway. So you don't want to go, oh, well, I read this is good for this, so I'm going to take this. Well, it could be the wrong thing to do. The other thing is that depression isn't always caused solely from low serotonin. Depression can be from what's called a tryptophan steal, where tryptophan's being stolen off through this, especially if the person's got IDO gene defects, or they have a chronic infection like Lyme or anything else that pushes this pathway, and they develop a whole bunch of this bad guy, this quinolinic acid. and that causes depression big time. So more of the people that are really struggling with depression, it's going this way. So feeding the HTP this way is the wrong thing to do because now they're depressed and they're biting off your head. So now they're a really not fun person to be with, and this is their fourth relationship. So you have to look at all these genes when you're assessing that in a person. So I know most people come to me because they have Lyme and they have cancer. But as we start to mellow those things out and we're working on those things, then we can start addressing some of this other stuff that could be really helpful. So same thing with dopamine. Dopamine is fed through tyrosine here to make dopamine. It goes through the MAO gene as well, but more frequently through the COMP gene. So this gene is affected also with dopamine with hydrogen peroxide. That's why I'm not a fan of hydrogen peroxide as a therapy. So because that blocks that gene, it can cause a lot more ADD, ADHD symptoms in a person. So symptoms of excess dopamine, dopamine is your driver neurotransmitter. So a person that has COMP gene defects, let's look at where the COMP gene is right here. People with these defects tend to be, as youngsters, have a lot of ADD, ADHD. They tend to be maybe a little bit more problem students because it's very difficult for them to stay focused because their dopamine is just like, I got to find something new. I got to do something new. I got to do something different. Oh, there's a squirrel. And so it's hard to stay focused. But as an adult, these people tend to be the entrepreneurs, they tend to be the company leaders, they tend to be maybe not the best employees, but they tend to own their own businesses and they tend to get a lot of things done. You look at the history of anybody like a Steve Jobs and those kind of people, they definitely had a lot of COMP gene defects. So I am not a person who is in the favor. I used to see a lot of ADD, ADHD kids, and you look at their genetics, and this is what their genetics look like right there. I'm not in favor of necessarily trying to change that because that's my genes right there too. So I think there's going to be advantages if you harvest it in the right way. But it could be good to not feed that pathway too hard. So if you have a child with ADD, ADHD, it's fed through tyrosine. These kids tend to be that have these COMP gene defects. You can get basically addicted to dopamine. So these kids, in excess, these people can be thrill seekers, could do dangerous things, and that can be harmful to them. If you took your child that had those symptom patterns and you decreased their protein, literally just you're getting a half a piece of chicken instead of a whole chicken breast, and you have to eat your squash or more, whatever. So if you cut their protein in half, you can see a dramatic change in the temperament of the child. I had one parent who had an adopted, I told this story in one of my other genetic slide presentations. They adopted this little kid that his genes were one of the worst I've ever seen. His biopterin pathway, and he was literally climbing the walls. The parents were literally like, "This kid's going to be in prison by the time he's 6 years old if we can't get this under control." And we literally cut out protein completely from his diet. And the parents came in and said, "We've never even met this kid before. He's like a totally different child." So you can have dramatic change in a person's temperament. So when we're talking about neurotransmitters, we're talking about temperament, we're talking about ability to focus, we're talking about ability to think, we're talking about how your brain's working. But we're also talking about muscle contraction and you need neurotransmitters everywhere that you have two neurons that connect. not just in your brain. So looking at the pathway, looking at the genes, looking at the substrates, meaning what forms that end product, you can um, help guide the patient through issues that they're having and solve a lot of their problems. So if that is you, if I've struck a chord with any of you, just contact us and schedule a time that we can look at your genes in a little bit different light that way, because there's other things that we can do to help a person um, other than just looking at it from, being so myopic with just cancer or Lyme or whatever you're going through specifically. Also, you can do a neurotransmitter test. I don't do many of these anymore, but you can test a person's neurotransmitter and see where they're at. The reason why I'm not super keen on this is because this changes day by day. So it's not the most specifically accurate test, but it does give you kind of a hint of where we're off. And it can help a patient deal with that in some ways. But balancing those neurotransmitters can be extremely helpful. The glutamate is a neurotransmitter too, and remember, glutamate is an excitatory neurotransmitter in your brain. It is necessary, even though when we talk about glutamate with cancer, we speak about it in such negative terms, but it is a necessary neurotransmitter. It's what wakes you up in the morning. It's what keeps you focused. People with a higher intelligence tend to have higher glutamate levels. But you have to make sure it's all about balance too. So GAD defects cause you to have excess glutamate. BHMT08 and CBS699 defects cause you to create excess glutamate. So the GAD gene is how you break down glutamate to GABA, which GABA is a calming neurotransmitter. And that's necessary to do that. So people that have a lot of defects on their GAD genes, then they can have difficulty going to sleep, staying asleep. Their brain is just racing. People with excess glutamate tend to have a lot more OCD-like characteristics. And tend to be much more perfectionistic, can't let things go. They perseverate on thoughts, even worriers. This is a huge issue with cancer or any serious disease. If, I've said this over and over is if I can't get my cancer patients to get to a point of just, hey, this is what it is. I'm going to do everything I possibly can, but I'm putting this in the hands of my Heavenly Father, and I'm going to let it go. Not that I'm going to be ignorant, stick my head in the sand and not learn more, but I can't stay stuck in perseveration of thought, of worry, or what if, or what happens, and that is very detrimental. So that will produce even more glutamate. So you have to get control of your thoughts. So many of these things, so we're talking about physiological pathways, but physiological pathways, most of them are governed by what's called a negative feedback loop. So if I'm burning dopamine because I'm doing things that are dopamine related, meaning I'm doing risky things and speeding down the highway and I'm going to into risky behavior, I will become basically addicted, not truly addicted, but I will draw and create more dopamine. I will actually crave more protein to make more dopamine to feed that pathway because I'm burning dopamine. So I'm basically, it's acting like a vacuum. I'm sucking in more and I'm craving more. It's the same thing with glutamate. If I'm going to stay perseverating on thought and worried and anxious and upset, and then I will make more glutamate. And it's this whole negative feedback. It's a negative cycle, but it works on that negative feedback loop. So I'm burning it, so I'm going to need more. So it's a dangerous situation to be in. That's why I think Scripture is very clear. You have to take captive every thought. You have to choose to harness this and to make it productive and to be as thoughtful about your thoughts as you possibly can. You know, purposely take control of these things and change your habit. Now, I understand when you have a lot of issues, it's difficult to do that and you need some help. And that's why just understanding that, wow, I'm feeding this, well, I'm going to stop feeding the beast, and then that will help a lot. So, and glutamate is also fed by amino acids, but not these amino acids. It's fed by glutamine. Um, so, cutting back on protein a little bit is better in that circumstance if you're dealing with glutamate too. So these are some more of the glutamate genes that we look at, and the pathways that we look at. And I won't get into the NOS genes. We'll save that till next week. Does that bring up any questions or concerns for anybody?
I do have a question about this, Dr. Connor. I have several people in my life that are telling me, "Oh, you've got to go get surgery," and I'm not quite certain how to handle them. One of them specifically is in her 10th round of chemotherapy, and I just need some words of wisdom as what to say to them. I mean, I wrote down what you just said about putting in the hands of our Heavenly Father, and I totally believe that, but sometimes it gets overwhelming. They think they're being
Sure.
nice, good to me, but it gets to the point where I'm avoiding people now.
Well, I'd suggest you go and you read the book of Galatians, because that honestly, that has helped me a lot to deal with people that disagree with
I
me.
just started it this morning.
So, and that the truth is, from a psychological standpoint, people want you to do what they're doing because it justifies what they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're doing what they're, even if they're running off of a cliff and jumping off of a cliff, as long as there's more people doing it, then they feel good about it. So, and I'm not saying that what that person is doing is wrong for her or him. It's that, but when someone is judging you, um, you can feel it, can't you?
Oh, yes.
And so make sure that you're not judging other people. Don't judge them that they're doing the wrong thing, because you're going to be judged the same way.
Okay.
So just go, hey, whatever is right for you, then you should do that. But don't judge me on what I'm doing. I really respect that, or we're going to have to distance ourselves from each other a little bit during this process. And there isn't anything wrong with doing that. And if that person is really a real friend, they'll, apologize and they'll respect your decision. And if they're so insecure about their decision-making process, they're going to be more apt to pressure you to do what they're doing, because then that will give them more security. So it's really coming from that person's insecurity, but it still doesn't feel good. So I understand that. So you're just you might have to have a talk with that person if they're close, if they're a family member that they're always going to be in your life. If they're not a family member that's going to be not in your life, and you could, move that relationship a little, make a little distance in that relationship, it might be the best thing to do.
Okay, thank you.
The biggest thing is you want to respect everybody's decision, because it's their decision. And when we stop judging other people, then we're not judged with that same judgment. But even when we stop judging other people, people can be judging us.
Mm-hmm.
And those are people that maybe we either have a talk with and say, you're judging me on the decision I'm making. You need to respect my decision, or we need to not talk so much. And if they're truly a friend and they're truly mature then they should be able to handle that. If not, then maybe it was time to say goodbye for a while. So that would be my opinion. So
Thank you.
anything else? Well, hopefully these are helpful for everybody. If you have questions that you want addressed on here, you can email them to me. If I don't get them, email me again next week. I understand we get like 200 emails a day. So sometimes gets buried real quick. So but even put in the title or whatever that's called on the email, put it in Zoom call questions so that I will get to those. All right, so I probably will have another Zoom call this weekend. I'll post it on Facebook because I missed last week. And there's some new stuff that I want to go over about some other stuff that I'm studying. So I'll put some slides together and we'll go over that. All right, everybody have a blessed day. This will be recorded and up on Facebook if you want to listen to it again. And if you do have questions about anything emotionally that you're going through that you want me to look at your genes this way, then make sure you just call the office and set up a time. Thank you.
Awesome call. Thanks so much.
Oh, you bet. All right, we will end here. Bye-bye.